Let's continue with our class on the 37 practices of a Bodhisattva. Today we will talk about the next part, which is bringing decline onto the path. Bringing decline to the path has two aspects. The first one is decline, the other one is prosperity. At the times of decline, that is the period of time that you need to bring that onto the path. At the time of enjoying all kinds of prosperity, such as status and fame and all that, you need to bring that onto the path of practice as well. I think most of people can hardly bring prosperity onto the path of practice. Most people would start practice at the time of declining. So let's take a look at the first one. Even if I am deprived of a livelihood, constantly belittled by everyone, and stricken by a severe illness and or by the influence of demonic force, it is the practice of bodhisattvas to take up on myself all the suffering and evil of all beings without becoming depressed. We may either have lacked wealth and enjoyment from the very beginning, or it may be that we were previously in possession of them, but that since then they have been plundered by the enemies or become exhausted. The ability to acquire even just for food and clothes, which serve the purpose of sustaining our lives, may also have been lost. Nowadays, I think people can hardly find jobs. The employment rate had plummeted, though it's difficult to see that in this valley. We see people that would travel to Larangar, not many of them, because it also requires a lot of money to come here as well. And at that time, not only that, but people may be constantly making us an object of scorn and contempt, and on top of that, having been stricken by severe illnesses such as leprosy, and also attacked by vicious demonic influence, such as an evil spirit, we may have become completely miserable. It is suffering on suffering. Being under all kinds of influence, negative influence. Yet, judging from the torments of one's own suffering, we must still think how unbearable must it be, the suffering of others, and thereby, with the strength of compassion, take up on oneself all the suffering and evil of all sentient beings. To carry this out with fortitude, free from faint-heartedness and the timidity of thinking, how will I ever endure such decline and loss? I think people can be very different when it comes to the capacity of endure suffering and endure difficulties. There are people that can get more and more stronger by going through various kinds of obstacles, and then there are the kinds of people that get weaker and more faint-hearted the more of obstacles that they encounter. Though we may seem very similar, the beings of Jambuvipa, we all have the face shape of a scapula, or a triangular shape of face shape, but the level of being vexed and the suffering and the different karma of sentient beings can be of great difference. You may feel that, oh, this one looks pretty good, very beautiful looking and well-dressed and very cultured and so on and so forth, but you may not know this is probably the person that is going through a great amount of suffering. And I think one of the most important standard, or one of the most important criteria to determine whether a person has wisdom or not, is whether they have courage to face various kinds of obstacles, if they have that kind of fortitude free from faint-heartedness or not. This is the way this is the manner of practice where all bodhisattvas bring decline onto the path. From the way of the bodhisattva, without suffering, there is no renunciation. Furthermore, concerning the qualities of suffering through sadness, haughtiness is cleared away, so your pride, your arrogance can be cleared. There are people who do not have any suffering throughout their whole life. There would be no merit that's generated that further discuss the quality of working with one's suffering, or the merits that can begin through contemplating up on suffering. And then in the way of the bodhisattva, over here it says that when fishermen, farmers, and butchers, thinking merely of their own survival, tolerate the miseries of heat and cold, how can I then not bear the same to bring about the happiness of beings? And for the sake of suffering and sake of satisfying my desires, I have undergone 1,000 times the torments of being burned in hell, thereby achieving nothing for myself and others. This shows that it is reasonable to bear the hardship of suffering when accomplishing that which is truly meaningful. Today, the key that we're studying is that the more suffering, the better. People, the mundane beings, usually would say that mundane beings would say that, well, too much suffering. But for the practitioners, the more suffering, the better, because it is the blessings of the three jewels. It is very good that you are vexed by afflictions and cannot fall asleep. This shows that it is reasonable to bear with the hardship of suffering when accomplishing that which is truly meaningful. Moreover, therefore, disregard harm and be able to withstand suffering. And if, when feeling discouraged, one discards effort, how then will there ever be liberation from misery? The mundane beings, at times of encountering obstacles and suffering, people tend to get quite anxious. But as Mahayana practitioners, when encountering all kinds of pain and suffering, we need to be able to, and we are able to see from a different angle and see the value of those experiences as well. The mundane beings would supplicate to say that, may I not going through suffering, may I not get ill, may I not have any poverty or be sickened. So on and so forth. But as a Mahayana practitioner, we need to know that the more suffering that we go through, the more practice opportunities we have. According to the precious garland of the middle way, it says that even if you have degenerated to be like a hungry ghost, do not become discouraged. Moreover, Lord Atisha said, when you have become depressed, you should uplift your mind. At times you complain that, oh, I have so much suffering, why the misfortune all dawned on me, so on and so forth. At that moment, you should uplift your mindset. This is all of those sufferings can be a practice of ascetic in the Buddhist tradition. And then, according to Potoa, he explained, some traders say that when it snows, it is good for the horses and hooves. And when it rains in the evening, enemies will not approach. There are always a different perspective we can take the current situation. when it snows, most of the times the merchants won't like it, but it is good for the horses' hooves. And when it rains in the evening, people most of the time won't like it, but enemies won't approach. In the same way, sickness, poverty, and abuse, including even the suffering experienced in dream, have numerous qualities such as the purification of evil and so forth when being brought onto the path. As you can see, the merchants would be able to see the opposite aspect of having snow. Though the roads are difficult to walk, but the snow can moist the hooves of horses, so it's good for the horses. And when it rains in the evening, usually people don't like it. But at least the thieves won't approach because it leaves the footprints of them and they can be caught. Similarly, let it be sickness, poverty, abuse, nightmares, and numerous kinds of poverty can be seen from the perspective of numerous qualities, numerous merits, meaning that numerous qualities can arise from those kinds of situations, such as the purification of evil and so forth. Whenever we encounter difficult situations, I hope that you can remember this particular teaching. You should be able to transform difficult situations such as being fired, such as all kinds of interpersonal relationships and so on and so forth, and being slandered and so on. Whenever you encounter those kinds of difficult to endure situations, just contemplate that this is really wonderful. This situation is just like a wish-fulfilling jewel. And then you should be able to remember the example of a snowy night or a snowy day for the merchants to travel and those kinds of imageries. Whatever we encounter, we need to recognize that those are simply the blessings of the three jewels. And you should be able to understand that those situations can be very useful to you to dispel your obstacles. And sometimes the difficult obstacles can also be transformed into a favorable condition, such as destroying one's self-cherishing mind and all kinds of arrogance and so on. I hope you remember that, so that all kinds of qualities could be generated from obstacles. And then Geshe Karakpa spoke as the following: even the slightest suffering now exhausts the evil you have done in the past. In the future, you will certainly be happy, so cultivate a liking for suffering. Nowadays, you can probably study it as a theory. You would say that, oh, I know in theory I should be happy, but this is just too difficult to bear. My afflictions are way too powerful and I can't work with it. I'm sure Lama, you are also would also go through those afflictions. Geshe Karakpa then continued to say that adverse circumstances are the spiritual advisor. Obstacles are admonishments to virtuous practice. Suffering is the broom that sweeps away evil. Do not look upon these as unpleasant misfortunes. Try not to see the obstacles as unfortunate situations. Rather, you should see the possibilities of it. Within the Mahayana teachings, I believe this is a text that is even rare to find even within the exoteric teachings, because it strikes directly to our weak point. We need to transform all kinds of situations, especially adversary, onto the path of practice.
Sunam dayi tanche zebani tonani behjana pasheja kirkana jiranlon chubai chubam sonen droba jurvara jo